the Galactic Combat Academy's chief instructor's training blade, forged from military-grade durasteel rated to withstand plasma strikes, just folded in half like wet paper, and the human woman is apologizing for holding it wrong. Kael'thas stared at the ruined weapon in his three-fingered hand, his crest flattening against his skull in a reflexive expression of profound confusion. In 400 cycles of teaching the galaxy's finest warriors across 47 different species, through 533 documented combat victories, he had never seen a training blade fail. These weapons were designed to be indestructible. They had to be. Students learning combat techniques needed equipment that could withstand the full force of their strikes, their parries, their mistakes. The human female, Jessica Moore, according to her registration documents, stood before him with her hands clasped together, her face displaying what his xenopsychology briefing had labeled embarrassment. Her skin had taken on a slightly darker pigmentation around her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she said again, her voice carrying that peculiar musical quality human speech possessed. According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. "I think I grabbed it too hard when you came at me. Is it expensive? I can pay for it." "You grabbed it," Kael'thas repeated slowly. Around them, the training floor had gone silent. 37 students from a dozen species had stopped their exercises to stare. The weapon in his hand looked like someone had taken a perfectly straight blade and simply decided it should be U-shaped instead. The metal hadn't shattered or cracked. It had folded as though the molecular bonds had simply given up. "Commander Kael'thas." That was Vexia's voice crackling through his comm unit, urgent and sharp. "We saw that on the monitoring feeds. What just happened?" What just happened? Excellent question. Kael'thas had been demonstrating a basic disarming technique, something he'd performed literally thousands of times. The human had been holding the practice sword in what his trained eye immediately recognized as an untrained grip. All wrong, completely vulnerable. He'd moved to show her the proper defensive stance, had reached to adjust her weapon position in the standard instructional correction, and then the blade had folded. Not bent, folded, like fabric. "I believe," Kael'thas said carefully into his comm, "we may have a equipment malfunction, requesting a replacement training sword." "On its way," Vexia replied, but her tone suggested she didn't believe the equipment malfunction theory any more than he did. Jessica Moore was looking around at the other students with growing concern. Should I go? I really didn't mean to break anything. I just got startled when you moved so fast, and I might have tensed up a bit." Tensed up. Kael'thas set the ruined blade carefully on the equipment rack, where it sagged like a piece of overcooked vegetable matter. "Miss Moore, how would you describe your physical conditioning level?" She laughed. Humans did that when they were uncomfortable, he'd learned. "Oh, I'm definitely not athletic. I teach kindergarten back on Earth, 5-year-olds. My exercise routine is basically chasing kids around all day and occasionally doing yoga when I remember." Kindergarten. Young children. His briefing materials had mentioned that humans took extensive care of their offspring, but the details had been sparse. "And this occupation requires physical strength?" "I mean, sort of," Jessica shrugged, another human gesture. "You're lifting kids a lot, breaking up toy fights, catching them when they're about to faceplant off the climbing structure, that kind of thing." "Why?" Before Kael'thas could respond, a junior instructor approached with a new training sword. This one was composed of a different alloy, titanium-reinforced durasteel with a crystalline core matrix, even stronger than the first. "Here, Commander." "Thank you." Kael'thas took the weapon, tested its weight and balance with practiced efficiency, and turned back to Jessica. Around them, he noticed that every student had abandoned any pretense of continuing their own training. They were watching. Of course they were. In an academy where reputation and martial prowess meant everything, the impossible had just occurred. "Let's try this again," he said, keeping his voice level and professional. "I'm going to show you the proper defensive stance. Hold the sword like this." He demonstrated, then handed her the blade. Jessica took it with obvious care, mimicking his grip. "Like this?" "Close enough for now." Kael'thas circled around her, assessing. Her stance was all wrong, weight distributed incorrectly, shoulders too high, feet at the wrong angle. Completely untrained, exactly as expected for a civilian educator. "Now, I'm going to make a slow approach from your right side. All I want you to do is bring the blade up to deflect. Just a simple block, nothing fancy." "Okay," she sounded nervous. Kael'thas moved in slowly, telegraphing his approach deliberately, his own practice blade raised in the most basic attack angle taught to first-cycle students. Jessica saw him coming, started to raise her sword, adjusted her grip slightly. The second blade folded with a sound like a sigh. This time, Kael'thas caught the exact moment it happened. Her hand had tightened around the grip, he'd seen her knuckles shift, and the metal had simply crumpled inward where her fingers pressed. The structural integrity had just ceased to exist. "Oh no," Jessica said, staring at the ruined weapon. "Oh no, I did it again. What is wrong with me?" "What is wrong with—" Kael'thas couldn't finish the sentence. His comm unit was exploding with incoming signals. Through the observation windows above the training floor, he could see senior staff gathering, their attention fixed on the scene below. The training floor doors burst open. Commander Zilak strode in, his command insignia catching the light, his expression set in what Kael'thas had learned to recognize as barely controlled alarm. Behind him came Vexia, the Academy's master of arms, carrying what looked like their entire diagnostic kit. "Miss Moore," Commander Zilak said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm Commander Zilax, director of this facility. Would you mind submitting to a brief physical examination? Nothing invasive, just some scans." Jessica looked between the commander, Kael'thas, and the growing crowd of observers. "Did I do something wrong?" "I'm really sorry about the swords. I honestly don't know what happened." "You're not in trouble," the commander assured her. "We're simply curious about some readings." Vexia had already begun running her scanner over Jessica, who stood still with the awkward patience of someone subjected to bureaucratic procedures they didn't quite understand. After a moment, Vexia looked up at the commander and gave a subtle gesture that Kael'thas recognized. Nothing unusual detected. "Miss Moore," the commander continued, "according to these scans, your muscle density, bone structure, and physical capabilities all fall within expected parameters for a human female of your age and body type. Would you say that's accurate?" "I guess," Jessica frowned. "I mean, I've never had anyone measure that stuff before, but I'm pretty average. Maybe slightly below average. I failed gym class twice in high school." "You failed physical education," Kael'thas repeated, looking at the two folded training swords. "Yeah, I cannot throw a ball to save my life. And running? Forget it. I'm always the last one picked for sports teams." She said this with a self-deprecating smile that her xenopsychology briefing suggested indicated she didn't consider it a serious character flaw. Commander Zilax and Vexia exchanged a long look. The commander's crest was fully extended now, a sign of either aggression or extreme stress. "Miss Moore, would you be willing to participate in one more test? I'd like to bring out a different type of training implement." Sure, I guess. But maybe something I can't break this time?" "We'll see." The commander gestured to Vexia, who departed and returned moments later carrying a long case. When she opened it, Kael'thas felt his breath catch. Inside was the blade of Catharak, a ceremonial weapon forged 3,000 cycles ago, created using techniques lost to time. It was functionally indestructible. The Academy kept it as a symbol of martial tradition, occasionally allowing masters to train with it as an honor. "This weapon," Commander Zilak said carefully, "has survived battles, planetary re-entry, and once spent 50 cycles floating in the void of space. It emerged from all these experiences without a single scratch. The molecular structure is, well, Our best scientists still don't fully understand it. We'd like you to hold it." Jessica looked at the blade with appropriate reverence. "That looks really old and important. Are you sure? Please." She reached out and gently took the blade from Vexia. For a moment, nothing happened. Jessica held it, testing its weight. "Wow, this is lighter than the other ones." "Now," the commander said, "I want you to grip it. Really grip it, as hard as you can." "But what if I—" "Please, Miss Moore." Jessica bit her lip, then tightened her hand around the grip. Her arm tensed. The ancient blade, survivor of millennia, witness to the rise and fall of civilizations, crumpled like dried leaves. The sound it made was obscene, a metallic scream that echoed through the training hall. When Jessica opened her hand in horror, the blade dropped in pieces, the legendary molecular bonds reduced to crystalline fragments that tinkled against the floor like broken glass. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That looked really old. Was that an antique? How much do I owe you?" Nobody answered. Commander Zilax had gone very still, the kind of stillness that preceded either violence or complete system shutdown. Vexia was staring at her scanner as though it had personally betrayed her. Kael'thas found himself sitting down on the nearest bench, his mind trying and failing to process what his eyes had witnessed. The human female who failed gymnasium class, who taught small children, who described herself as not athletic, had just destroyed the indestructible. "Miss Moore," the commander finally said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I think we need to have a longer conversation. Would you come with me to the conference room?" 20 minutes later, Jessica sat at a table surrounded by the Academy's entire senior staff, plus several hastily connected holographic officials from the Galactic Defense Council. She had a cup of what humans called tea in front of her, though she hadn't touched it. "So let me make sure I understand," she said slowly. "You're telling me that those swords I bent are supposed to be super strong, like military-grade strong." "They're rated to withstand direct strikes from plasma weaponry," Vexia confirmed. "We've had students try to break them deliberately using powered armor. They couldn't. But I just grabbed them." "You just grabbed them," Kael'thas agreed. He'd found his voice again, though his worldview was still undergoing rapid structural collapse. Jessica processed this, her face cycling through several expressions his xenopsychology training couldn't quite categorize. "Okay, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm not strong, like I need my boyfriend to open pickle jars for me." "Perhaps," suggested one of the holographic observers, a researcher named Dirax, "you could describe a typical day in your occupation. We're trying to understand what demands your profession places on you." "Oh, okay," Jessica thought for a moment. "I get to school around 7:30, set up the classroom, kids start arriving at 8. There are 25 of them, all 5 or 6 years old." She paused. "Do you know much about human children?" Several beings shook their heads or performed equivalent gestures. "Right, well, 5-year-olds are basically tiny chaos engines. They have zero impulse control, infinite energy, and absolutely no concept of danger. My job is to keep them alive, educated, and not fighting each other for 6 hours straight." "Fighting?" Kael'thas leaned forward. "They engage in combat?" Jessica laughed. "Not like actual fighting, but yeah, they'll wrestle over toys, push each other, grab things out of each other's hands. I'm constantly pulling kids apart, redirecting their energy, stopping someone from hitting someone else with a block." "Stopping them how?" Vexia asked, her scanner still running. "Well, if I see 2 kids about to fight over a toy, I'll step in and catch their hands before they can grab it. Or if someone's about to push, I'll intercept and redirect them. It's a lot of physical intervention," she demonstrated with her hands. "You learn to be really fast, and you develop this kind of constant awareness of where all 25 kids are and what they're doing. It's like..." She searched for words. "It's like having to track 25 independent variables simultaneously, while also teaching math and making sure nobody eats glue." Commander Zilax was making notes on his datapad. And this requires you to catch them, to physically intercept their movements? All the time. Kids are constantly about to hurt themselves. They'll climb on things that aren't stable, they'll run without looking, they'll trip over their own feet. I'm catching falling children probably 10 times a day, minimum. You develop really good reflexes. Kael'thas felt something click in his mind. Show me, he said suddenly. Show you what? Show me how you redirect a child's movement. Pretend I'm one of your students trying to grab a toy. Jessica looked uncertain but stood up. Okay, so if a kid is reaching for something aggressively, she positioned herself. Go ahead, reach for something on the table. Kael'thas reached toward the data pad. Jessica's hand moved, and his worldview shattered completely. She hadn't grabbed his hand. She'd touched it barely, with 2 fingers, and somehow his entire arm's momentum had dissipated and redirected. He found himself reaching in a completely different direction with no memory of changing course. The movement had been so smooth, so efficient, that his muscles hadn't even registered the change. By the ancestors, he breathed. That's a basic redirect, Jessica said, sitting back down. You use their momentum against them, guide it in a safer direction. You can't fight a 5-year-old's energy. They're surprisingly strong when they want something. You have to flow with it and channel it elsewhere. Every martial artist in the room was staring at her. Miss Moore, said Dirax carefully, what you just demonstrated is an advanced combat technique that we teach to 4th cycle students. It requires extensive training in force dynamics and momentum manipulation. Jessica blinked. I just learned it from experience. If you try to stop a kid directly, you'll hurt them or yourself. You have to be gentle but firm. Could you demonstrate the catching technique? Vexia asked. When a child is falling? Sure, but I'd need something to catch. I can't really drop test someone. They found a weighted training dummy and brought it to the conference room. Jessica stood ready. Okay, drop it. Vexia released the dummy. It fell. Jessica moved, and every combat sensor in the room screamed in alarm. She'd moved faster than the sensors could properly track, her hands intercepting the falling dummy with precision that defied the gravity calculations, absorbing its kinetic energy and bringing it to a complete stop without any apparent strain. The motion had been so smooth, so practiced, that she'd made it look effortless. That's not possible, Vexia whispered, staring at her scanner. The speed, the reaction time, the force absorption. Our best combat specialists can't do that. I do it multiple times a day, Jessica said, setting the dummy down. Kids fall a lot. You have to be ready. Commander Zilax looked at Kael'thas. Your assessment? Kael'thas swallowed hard. Every technique she's demonstrated, the redirection, the interception, the force absorption, these are advanced martial arts applications. We spend years teaching students to perform these skills. She does them instinctively because her occupation demands it. But she's not a warrior, someone objected. No, Kael'thas agreed. She's something that requires greater skill than a warrior. She's a caretaker of young who can harm themselves or others at any moment. She has to be fast enough to prevent injury, strong enough to physically intervene, and controlled enough to never hurt the children she's protecting. Do you understand? She has to use combat-level capabilities with perfect restraint against targets she's protecting. He looked at Jessica with something approaching awe. That's harder than fighting. Much harder. Jessica was shaking her head. You're making it sound way more impressive than it is. It's just teaching. Every kindergarten teacher does this stuff. A long silence followed that statement. Every kindergarten teacher, Commander Zilax repeated. Miss Moore, how many kindergarten teachers are there on Earth? I don't know exactly. Millions, probably. Every school has at least a few. Millions. The commander looked at his fellow officers. Millions of humans with these capabilities, just in the child education sector. And that's not even counting the other grades, Jessica added helpfully. Or daycare workers, or nannies, or parents. Pretty much anyone who deals with small children develops these skills. Parents, someone whispered, the majority of adult humans. Jessica finally seemed to catch on to the growing alarm in the room. Wait, is this not normal? Do other species' children not require this kind of supervision? Most species' children, Dirac explained carefully, are born with far more developed motor control and risk assessment capabilities. They require relatively minimal physical intervention from caregivers. Oh, Jessica processed this, so human kids are just especially chaotic? It would appear so, the commander said. Or rather, human children are proportionally as challenging to adult humans as other species' children are to their adults. But adult humans possess capabilities that vastly exceed what we've classified as civilian baselines. Kael'thas leaned back in his chair, the full implications settling over him like a heavy cloak. He'd spent his entire life mastering combat, becoming one of the finest warriors in the known galaxy. And this human civilian, this teacher of small children, this person who failed gymnasium class, had just casually demonstrated that her daily occupational requirements exceeded his elite military training. Miss Moore, he said quietly, when I attempted to teach you combat, I was, in effect, trying to teach you a less refined version of what you already do every day. She laughed, that nervous human laugh again. I mean, I don't think breaking up toy disputes is the same as actual fighting. Isn't it? Vexia countered. You're managing multiple simultaneous threats, preventing violence, redirecting aggressive actions, and maintaining constant situational awareness. The only difference is your opponents are smaller, and you're actively trying not to harm them. In many ways, that's more difficult. We need to revise our entire human threat assessment, Commander Zilak said, making more notes. If their civilians possess these capabilities, what are their actual military personnel capable of? Oh, soldiers? Jessica said. They train way harder than teachers. They're incredibly disciplined. I could never do what they do. The room fell silent again as everyone contemplated that statement. This explains the weapon failures, Vexia said finally. Your grip strength isn't unusual for a human, but the materials we use are designed for species whose caregiving doesn't require these capabilities. Our strongest warriors can't match what you need just to do your job safely. Jessica looked at the broken pieces of the ancient blade, still scattered on a tray someone had brought to the conference room. I really am sorry about that sword. It looked important. It was, Kael'thas said, but I think we learned something more valuable today. He stood, his posture shifting into the formal stance of a student acknowledging a master. Miss Moore, I attempted to teach you combat because I saw an untrained civilian. I was wrong. You're not untrained. You're trained in something far more demanding than what I know. I apologize for the presumption. Jessica's face flushed that darker color. Again. Oh no, please don't bow or whatever that is. You were being nice, offering to show me your combat stuff. I'm the one who broke your equipment. Equipment that was inadequate to your needs, Commander Zilak said. He stood as well. Miss Moore, on behalf of the Galactic Combat Academy, I'd like to formally request that you consider a position here as a cultural consultant. We need to understand human baseline capabilities better, and you've given us more insight in 1 hour than months of previous research. Oh, that's really flattering, but I need to get back to Earth. My class will be back from winter break in 2 weeks, and I've got lesson plans to finish. Your class, Vexia repeated, 25 human juveniles who require the supervision of someone with your capabilities. Right. And I'm also coordinating a field trip to the zoo next month, plus we have 3 parent volunteers who'll be coming to help with our art project. She trailed off, noticing everyone's expressions. What? You manage multiple adult humans assisting you while supervising juvenile humans in an uncontrolled environment filled with potentially dangerous fauna, Dirac translated. And you consider this routine. It's elementary school, Jessica said, sounding defensive. It's literally the most normal thing in the world. On Earth, anyway. Commander Zilax made a notation on his pad that Kael'thas suspected would lead to significant changes in how the Galactic Defense Council approached Earth relations. Miss Moore, you're free to return to your planet, of course, but we'll be sending formal inquiries to Earth's education system about establishing an exchange program. We have much to learn. If you want to learn about teaching kindergarten, there are way better teachers than me, Jessica said. I'm honestly pretty average at my job. That statement seemed to break something in Kael'thas. He started laughing, a harsh, barking sound that his species made under extreme stress or when confronted with profound absurdity. Average, he managed. She's average. Several other officers joined in with their species-equivalent expressions of overwhelmed amusement. Jessica looked around the room with increasing concern. Did I say something funny? No, Miss Moore, Commander Zilax said, regaining his composure. You said something terrifying, but thank you for your time today. We'll arrange transport back to Earth for you. 2 hours later, Jessica stood in the Academy's gift shop, browsing the merchandise with the slightly overwhelmed expression of a tourist who wasn't sure what was appropriate to purchase. She'd selected a decorative sword, a miniaturized replica of a training blade, rendered in soft materials that definitely couldn't hurt anyone. For my classroom, she explained to the nervous shopkeeper, the kids would think it's cool. We're doing a unit on different cultures next semester. The shopkeeper, who'd been briefed on the day's events, carefully wrapped the toy sword in multiple layers of protective material and placed it in a reinforced carrying case typically used for hazardous materials. Please, take this case as well. No charge. Oh, that's way too much for a toy sword, Jessica protested. I insist, the shopkeeper said firmly. Outside, Kael'thas waited to escort her to the transport bay. She'd asked for a tour of the facility before leaving, and he'd agreed, though he suspected his motivations were more about satisfying his own curiosity than any official duty. Can I ask you something? He said as they walked through the corridors. Sure. When you restrained my demonstration earlier, the redirect, did you realize what you were doing? Jessica thought about it. I guess I was just reacting like I would with a student. You reached suddenly, and I automatically redirected. It's like muscle memory. That's what I thought. Kael'thas gestured to the training halls around them. I've spent my entire life studying combat, 400 cycles, and you've shown me that what I do is a specialized application of what you consider childcare basics. I don't think that's fair to yourself, Jessica said. What you do is really skilled. I saw some of your students training. They're amazing. I could never move like that. But you do move like that. You just don't call it combat. They reached the transport bay. Jessica's ship was ready, the pilot checking final systems. She turned to Kael'thas and extended her hand in the human greeting gesture she'd explained earlier. Thank you for being so nice about the swords, and for not being mad. He took her hand carefully, very carefully, and performed the shaking motion. Thank you for the lesson, even if you didn't mean to teach one. Jessica smiled, boarded the ship, and settled into her seat. Through the viewport, Kael'thas watched her pull out a datapad and start reviewing what looked like educational materials. Even as the ship powered up and prepared for departure, she was focused on her work, humming something to herself. A teacher, a kindergarten teacher. He'd tried to teach her combat, and instead, she demonstrated that his entire martial discipline was just a shadow of what humans considered necessary for basic childcare. As the ship lifted off and disappeared into the station's traffic patterns, Kael'thas turned to find Commander Zilax standing beside him. So, the commander said, your thoughts? I'm going to request access to human educational materials, Kael'thas replied. Specifically, training guides for childhood education. If that's their baseline, I want to understand it. I've already submitted the request, Zilax said. The Galactic Defense Council is classifying all human civilians as Tier 1 combat capable until further assessment. Human educators are being classified as Tier 0. A new tier. A necessary one. The commander watched the space where Jessica's ship had been. She's going back to teach 25 children, and she considered today's events unusual only because she broke some equipment. Kael'thas thought about his 400 cycles of training, his 500 victories, his reputation across the known galaxy. "I wanted to teach her combat," he said quietly, "and she folded my training sword without trying." "Yes," Commander Zilax agreed. "That's going in my report, along with a recommendation that we never, ever try to fight humans, especially not the ones who work with their children." They stood in silence for a while, two of the galaxy's finest warriors, contemplating the fact that somewhere on Earth, millions of humans were doing their jobs that required them to be faster, stronger, and more skilled than elite military personnel, and considering it completely normal. Somewhere in the distance, alarms chimed as another training session began. Kael'thas listened to the familiar sounds and wondered how many of his students would believe what he'd witnessed today. Then again, he'd seen it himself and still wasn't sure he believed it. Jessica Moore, kindergarten teacher, had just redefined his understanding of human capability. And tomorrow, she'd go back to work, manage her classroom of chaos engines, and consider it just another Tuesday. The galaxy, Kael'thas reflected, was about to become a very different place.